This is Gemara Zevachim Daf Chof Tes Aguta Mayid, the Daf for Hoshana Rabbah. We like this Daf to be B'siyata D'Shmaya, an incredible schos refuah shlema on the day of the Chasima, such an incredible day for Gabriel Simcha ben Miriam Ahuva B'siyata D'Shmaya. Gabriel Simcha, Miriam Ahuva, and all Chaylim should have an incredible refuah shlema. Mirza Hashem. We're holding Chavtes and Aleph. We're 5 lines down. We're in the middle of figuring out the 2 different types of pigul as delineated by the Mishnah on the previous daf, which is the pigul of a machshava shloi bizmanoi and a machshava shloi bimkaimai. And the makairais, to be particular. The Mishnah listed the chilik in din that the machshava shloi bimkaimai is possible, but does not bear the penalty of kares. Whereas the machshava shalei bizmanai is, we'll call it, full-fledged pigul, that not only is it possible, but also the punishment is kares. And we went through many different iterations looking for the makar, and we finished up with the makar of Rava. As Rava taught us, it's a psika aricha, it's a long pasuk, and the pasuk in Sav, Rava darshin to be mechalek, that both the machshava shlei bizmanai and machshava shlei b'mkaimai, both of them are possible, but kares is only for shloi bizmanai. On that point, it picks up the Gemara 5 lines down. Amar lei Rav Papa leRav lididach. According to you, Rav, shlishi de parshas kedoshim tiyu mai darshis bei. Rav, you learned everything out from the pasuk in Saf. So what do you do with the pasuk in kedoshim? Responds Rava, Homi baile lamakom shei mishulash bidam bebasar ubeimurim. The pasuk, it teaches us that the makom for eating of the carbon, the achila of the carbon by the person, if he has the machshava shalei bimkaimai, has to be a place that has these 3 dinim. It's mishulash, and that's what the drush of Shlishi teaches us. Has to be a makom that's fit for a dam, a makom that's fit for a basar, and a makom that is fit for the emurim. Ask the Gemara, but wait, mikra kama. Why can that also be learned out from the pasuk in Tzav that says hima achol ye'achel midavki rachmana b'lashon shlishi? From the fact that the Torah says achol ye'achel, that the consumption in proximity to shlishi should teach us the same thing. Answers the Gemara, Amar Ravashi, Amrit l'shmaita kamid Rav Masna, Amar Lein. He responded, Im Yosef Havamina Shlishi Prat. I would have thought Shlishi is a Prat, Pegol is a Klal, Vinasa is a Klal Moisev ala Prat, and then Visrabi Shar Mekaimais. I would have been marbe all other places, not only places that are mishulash, that have these 3 properties, like we just listed, of basar, of dam, and of emurim. You would have thought it's marbe everything. So kamashal in the pasuk in kedoshim, that's not true. So says the Gemara, we're settling that Shitas Rava is that we learn everything out from the pasuk in Sav, the psika aricha, that teaches us machshava shlei bizmanai would therefore have the punishment of kares. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, and this is going to be a brisa that's really going to corroborate and really going to prove the way that we just arshined, that this pasuk in Sav is indeed referring to a machshava shaloi bizmanoi. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, v'machal ye'achal mibasar zevach shalamav. Says the pasuk in Vayikra, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, koif azlecha lishmaya. Literally, koif, put on top of, or cup your ears to hear. This is how you have to learn the pasuk. B'mechashev lechol mizivchai b'yoyim hashlishi akasa midaber. Is the pasuk talking about b'mechashev, machshava, which of course is like Rava explained, that the pasuk is all coming to teach us the makar for the machshava of shaloi bizmanoi. So is it b'mechashiv or eno yella b'achom mizivchei b'achom mizivchei, or is it not talking about a machshava, but it's talking about the actual act of eating liyoim hashlishi on the third day? So Amrit. So you're gonna say Acher shu kosher yachzer v'yipasel. You're gonna say that the pasuk can't be literally. Why not? Because once it's kosher through the avodah, is gonna come pasal by eating it on the third day. Meaning the pasuk is listing apostles. So if you're gonna tell me that everything was done, everything is good, and then you go and eat it liyoim hashlishi, is going to mess up the whole carbon. Armalei Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva, well, yeah, what's the problem with saying that? Hey, well, you know what? I'll tell you a makar. They all have a cheskas tahira, and then what happens? And then when they go and they see a discharge, it undoes the fact that they were tahar. So don't wonder about this, that if you go and you eat a carbon on the third day, says the Gemara, what's the problem? Just like we find by Hilchos Tumah V'Taira, that the halacha is everything could have been kosher, and yet the discharge messes it up, so too the same thing should be over here. So Amar Lei, Rav Eliezer responds, Hamakriv. The pasuk says Hamakriv Shasakravu Nifsal, and that teaches us that the apostles is only during the avodah, during the akrava, Veina Nifsal Bishlishi, and it's not apostles of eating it on day 3, or maybe Oimer Hamakriv Elazeh Koyin Hamakriv, or maybe the Makriv teaches us that it happens. Oimer hamakriv, or maybe the fact that the boss says hamakriv shows us elazeh koyin hamakriv. That what? It's the koyin that is makriv, that he can't do the avodah anymore. Kshoimer, when the pasuk says oisoi bezevach, oisoi, excuse me, bezevach umedaber veino medaber bekoyin. So we see that it's talking about the carbon, and that proves to us what we just heard, that it has to be talking about a machshava during the avodah. Says the Gemara ben Azay Oimer. No, I'll tell you a different way of darshing the pasuk. Oisai matam aloi mar levisha nemar v'loi se'acher lishalmoi. The pasuk says you should not be late in paying. Yochel, I would think af ma'acher nidroi v'loi yiratzeh. I would think one who doesn't pay his carbon is going to be part of lo yiratze tamaloi mar oisai below yiratze, only oisai, the pasuk of Pegel. Only if you have the machshava zara, you have the wrong thought process during the carbon. Oisai below yiratze, that messes up the carbon. However, v'macher nidrai below yiratze, if someone just doesn't bring his carbon at the right, doesn't fulfill his pledge, that is not in lo yiratza, it doesn't invalidate the carbon. Acherim oimrim, say the acherim 8 lines to the bottom of yiratza, first word in the line. Lo yichashev, the pasuk says, it will not be considered b'machshavo nifsol, and the pasuk teaches us that the carbon is possible if you have the wrong kavanah, veino nifsol b'shlishi, and it's not possible eating it on the third day. And that shita of acherim, of course, is like we explained the pasuk. Ask the Gemara, Ben Azai, according to Ben Azai, that says the word Oisai is coming to teach us a din about an eder. How does Ben Azai know the Josh that we just said, that the pasuk is referring to the carbon and not to the kayin? Iba Yisema answers the Gemara, either nafkale, ema nafkale medacherim, as the acherim learned. And the lo yiratzeh is talking about the carbon, so clearly not the kayin. Ask the Gemara further. Ben Azai, according to Ben Azai, Yosef lo yiratzeh vein me'acher benidroi lo yiratzeh me'hacha Nafka, do you really learn out from here? Midachayim nafka. They can learn out from the Achayim. The Tani was learned to the Bryce. Achayim, Raimim Yachli, Bechar, Shivra, Shanasai. So Gemara is wondering that according to Ben Azai, he's learning it out from Isai, this thing about being Ma'achar Nidra, not bringing his Nedra at the right time. But ask the Gemara, why do they not learn like the Achayim that said in the Bryce? Yachli, Bechar, Shivra, Shanasai, Bechar. That passed by its first year. You would think that it's considered Bibsule HaMikdashim V'Yifsal. As we turn over to Chavtes Amid Beis, says the Braisa, you would think that the Bachar, that its time has passed, and yet it was not the appropriate Avodah done. So you would think Bibsule HaMikdashim V'Yipasal. The Bachar should be considered like Bibsule HaMikdashim V'Yipasal. The Gancha, the Gaimer. Makish b'char lemaiser. Ma maiser don't have some mishana lechaverta. Av b'char in the fourth line of Chates Amid Beis. Ain't an ifsal mishana lechaverta. It's not going to become possible. So says the Gemara, why did Ben Azai have to use oisai to limit machar nidrai? Why can he learn like the Achirim? Explains the Gemara. I'll tell you why. Sel kadei techamina hani midi b'char. The lav bar hartzo. I would think that the din is only by a bachar. Why not? Because the bachar is not giving a ritoy. A bachar is not coming for a kapar and an aveira. Aval kashim the bnei hartzaninu ema loy lertzu. Maybe it won't give you that kapara. Kamashlan. That's a ben azay. It's the darshan from Oisai. Ask Mara, wait, vakatim also nafka. Why do you need from Oisai? Why do we learn it out from the pasuk? Why do we need an additional pasuk? It says the Gemara Ben Azai, Homi Bayalei Vaibachal Chet, Vaibishchal Chet. I'll tell you why. Because that pasuk we need for a different drasha. Sagdei Tachamina Hayel Vamer Rabbi Lazar. Vitem Rabbi Yechim. Ein Nishal Shalom Yisrael Kim Avakshim Menu Mamain Ve'ein Lai. One's wife Rachmana Litzlan is only going to die if what? If he asks for money. And he doesn't have to able to repay it. Shenemar in the Cholishalem. Lamiga mishavchat mitachtecha. Bahai ovon the Balta Acher Nami Mesa. So I would think on the Balta Acher of a Neder Nami Mesa that the wife could also be held responsible. Kamash when the pasuk teaches that no, only in you and not be'ishtecha, and because the pasuk is needed for that, Ben Azai doesn't have the pasuk left for stam macher nidrai for delaying and paying one's nether, one's vow in the carbon. Therefore, Ben Azai has learned it out from Oy Soy. Continues the Gemara, the two dots about 15 lines down. Acherim Mayrim, the next sheet in the Braisa say the Acherim b'machshavu nifsal v'ino nifsal b'shlishi. Rav Eliezer, lo yichashem avdilei. Says the Gemara, what does Rav Eliezer do with the pasuk of lo yichashem? Yibaylech Rav Yanai. Dam Rav Yanai b'nai l'machshava shematziyos zumizu. Says Rav Yanai, how do we know that machshava is arais? If someone has the wrong kavanah, if he has two wrong kavanahs, that it's going to block the pegel and it won't bring the courage. Remember, lo yichashev. From there we learn now, lo ya'arev boy, do not mix together machshavos acheros. V'Ramari masni. Ramari says, Amar Ravanai, minayin l'machshava b'kachim shuloike. How do you know there's malchus? Tamul Amar le'yachashev. So Amar le'Ravashi, the Ramari, lav she'in by maiso. How could there be malchus? We know the rule that if there's no maisa, then the lav doesn't carry with it the punishment of malchus. By my saying like in love answers Gemara Rabbi Yehuda. He the Amar lav shein by Maisa like in a love. He argues with that premise and he holds a lav shein by Maisa indeed does get malchus. Now we begin the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah carrying together with it Klalim. Says the Mishnah Zaklal Kol Shoyich Ramikav Malach Vazarek. The four critical avodos, and one he does them. What's the machshava that he has? He has a machshava lechol davar shedarkei lechol. This, of course, is really the continuation of yesterday's daf, yesterday's sugya, in which we learned: is it only davar shedarkei lechol or davar shein darkei lechol? This is the makars we spoke about yesterday. Says the Gemara, if you did any one of the four avodos, with the machshava to eat that which you normally eat in ulakter v'sharkol akter, or to burn something that's normally burned, kizayis chosla mekaymai pasal vein by karis. Again, as we just proved extensively, that a machshava shalai b'mekaymai doesn't have karis, but chosla zmanoi pagol, and yes, v'chayv love karis. Ubelvad sheyakriv amatir kimitzvasai. It's only if you did as required, that's where the kares will be. So, keitzad karav amati kimitzvasai. What is the case? What does it mean that if it's done as required? Shachad b'shtik, if he did the shchita without b'shtik, quiet, no bad intentions. Kibo v'alech v'zari chotz l'zmanai, oi. Sheshach chotz l'zmanai v'kibo v'alech v'zarek b'shtika, oi. So again, we're pointing out that one of the four critical avodas is done with the machshava shlei bizmanoi, and then zehu shemakriv amatir ki mitzvasei. This is a case where it's brought as required, and then there'll be karis. So what's the flip side? Keitzad loy karv amatir ki mitzvasei. Shachar chotz lemekaymai. If you did the shchita chotz lemekaymai, and then he did the other avodas chotz lemekaymai. And then what? In the first white line, or in the case of a Pesach and a Chata, Sheshachtan Shloi Lishma. As we've seen from the beginning of the Masechta, the halacha of a Pesach and a Chata Shloi Lishma is different than anything else, as it's completely possible. V'kiv l'alach v'zar chutz zmanei. Oy shach chutz zmanei v'kiv l'alach v'zar shel b'shman. Oy shach v'kav v'alach v'zar akdam shel shman. Zeu shaloi karav amatik mitzvasai. And in these cases, there will not be kares. Continues the Mishnah. Lechol kezayis b'achotz. Kezayis l'machar, kezayis l'machar, kezayis b'achotz. Someone had two machshavas. One is that he's an eat kezayis shaloi b'mkaymai and a machshava shaloi b'zmanai, or kezayis l'machar, kezayis b'achotz, or chatzi zayis b'achotz, chatzi l'machar, chatzi zayis l'machar, chatzi zayis b'achotz. In all of these cases, pasul vein by cars. Case number 3. Case number 4, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, no, he argues. Zakah. Says Rabbi Yehuda, I disagree. The rule is, if the machshav of the zman comes before the machshav of the makayim, then pigel and yes cars, chayav the cars. Machshav of the makayim, because the machshav of the zman, pasul the ain by cars. Rabbi Yehuda differentiates when the machshava, which was first. No, zev that pasul the ain by cars. Both of them are pasul, but don't have karis. Concludes the Mishnah, and of course we know the Gemara is going to explain all the cases in our Mishnah, but concludes the Mishnah, and everyone agrees, the final did, that if one did a half of a zayis for the achila and half zayis v'aktara, everyone agrees it's kasher. Why? Because those two are not mitzarif. Pick it up from the Gemara, b'siyata d'ishmaya.